Well, here we are again, Metroid fans. A new game has been released amongst a swirl of negativity and criticism. And I do think a lot of the criticism has been fair, and some of it is a bit overblown. And if you want to hear more about those critiques, I promise you can find 30 other videos that will gladly discuss them in exhaustive detail. In this video, I would like to set all of that aside for just a moment to highlight some of the things that Metroid Prime 4 does well, because some parts of this game are really cool and worth celebrating. And I'm going to keep the spoilers pretty light here. You should be fine if you haven't played or finished the game yet. Doo-doo-ba-da-dee-dee-dee-dee, that's the sound of me time traveling. Okay, this is Fat Brett from the future here. I just finished editing this video and I realized that only half of it is me actually saying positive things about the game, and the other half is me complaining about the story. I just wanted to insert this warning here that if you clicked on this video hoping for nothing but positivity, you are in for a disappointment. Anyway, back to the original script. For example, the visual design. This game is beautiful. The interior of the Chrono Tower is filled with this shining silver and lavender flowing architecture that almost looks organic, with a lot of very overtly yonic imagery, which I think is meant to give it a sense of a place of creative, generative power, renewal, and fertility. This is the site where an entire civilization may be reborn. It looks and feels totally different than anything else we've ever seen in a Metroid game before. Or the Fury Green is so lush and vibrant. One of my all-time favorite moments in any video game was the first time I ever landed on Talon 4 in the original Metroid Prime. This alien, rain-swept forest, and the way you could scan the flora and fauna and learn more about them, and how each creature fits into the larger ecosystem, their biology, their dietary habits, the predators and the prey and the scavengers. It felt alive to me in a way that no other game had before. I was immediately hooked. I had to keep exploring. And Fury Green successfully recreates that moment times 1,000. This area of the game is so rich in detail, and I love the sheer number of ancillary little things you can scan. These tubular creatures that pop up out of the water, the glowing plants that close up to protect themselves as you approach, the flocks of birds, the insects climbing up the walls, the ancient alien temples crumbling with age, overgrown with wildlife, and this vast world tree that towers over the entire jungle here. Unfortunately, the exploration and sense of discovery are a bit limited here, since the level design is so aggressively linear. But goddamn, you gotta admit, it looks great. Or the Volt Forge is awesome too. I saw someone complaining about the number of elevators in this level, but as far as I'm concerned, those elevators are the best part. As you descend, you can look out these long vertical windows and you can see the tower passing through multiple layers of raging storm clouds. I loved this view where all you can see outside is darkness, briefly lit up by lightning rattling through the atmosphere. Or this one where you break through the darkness into a lower, more open layer, and you can see clouds churning both above and below you, and rainstorms in the distance. It's just gorgeous. I also really liked the look of the flare pool area where the whole facility is built beneath the hulk of this massive dispersion cannon. Or the mine area where at first it seems really barren, but then as you get deeper and deeper and move out of the artificial mine shafts and into the natural cave system, it starts to become more organic and colorful and weird. And something else I was really impressed with in the world design, and something I hope returns in future games, is how focused everything is. Each region of Vuros is designed around a single function, and so every room, every detail, the layout is all contributing to that function in some way. For example, Volt Forge is a factory which assembles violas, and so every single room is designed around some specific phase of that assembly process. And the rooms build on each other and flow together in a really sensible way. It gives the world an internal logic and coherence, though it is kind of goofy that this vast industrial complex, a factory of truly epic proportions, the only factory that exists on the planet, doesn't do anything other than build endless motorcycles. It paints the Lemorn as an entire civilization that is just obsessed with motorcycles. But something else I really liked about the world design is the way it changes as the player interacts with it. For example, in your initial exploration of the Volt Forge, it is long dormant. None of these ancient devices have functioned in hundreds of years. And then you get the power back on and it suddenly comes to life, and every part of the assembly line gets going again. And there's so much movement, and you have to platform and fight your way through all of this equipment. It's really cool. I thought it was really fun. And we should talk about the sound design too, because it's another strength. The track that plays in the Fury Green is beautiful. I think it might be an all-time great for the series. But what I like about the soundtrack in other areas is how it changes over time. Again, using Volt Forge as an example. During your initial exploration, the track is appropriately subtle and atmospheric. And then when you turn the power on, the music roars to life too, becoming this noisy, energetic, thundering piece. Sylux's theme is another highlight. Even the desert, there's this rumor going around that you need an amiibo to play music in Soul Valley. It's not true, there's a track that plays here by default, and it is quiet and lonely, and it perfectly fits the wasteland atmosphere that the sound designers were trying to capture. I actually kind of liked it. I'm not sure why you would change it. I would compare it to the music that plays in Aegon Wastes in Metroid Prime 2. You know, not every track needs to be a melodic, catchy banger. Quiet music fits a quiet location. Something else I thought the game did really well were the boss fights. Sylux was particularly fun. He is aggressive, dynamic, very agile, very fast. He recreates the best confrontations against Dark Samus in 2 and 3 while still feeling distinct. He has some really surprising powers that I won't spoil here. I also love this guy, Zelios, a machine composed of many moving panels, launching dozens of energy blasts at a time. The gameplay becomes a pseudo-bullet hell for a while, and the game only gets better when you play on hard mode. These bosses pose a genuinely stiff challenge at the higher difficulty. It's worth replaying. On the whole, Prime 4's new psychic abilities tend to be pretty weak. We're just taking these space jump boots from previous games, and then calling them psychic space jump boots, so you know, whatever. But the one new ability they really nailed is this guided shot. They mix it into several of the boss fights in ways that make sense and I think are pretty fun. Of course, it functions exactly the same as the beetle back in Skyward Sword, just without motion controls. And there are a lot of things in Prime 4 that make it seem like it wanted to be a Wii game. The precision aiming, the lasso pull, drawing patterns on the screen to unlock doors. It just feels like all of this was meant to be controlled with a Wiimote. I almost wonder if these were based on an early concept that Retro Studios had for a follow-up to Metroid Prime 3 that was supposed to be released on the Wii, but then got shelved when they started work on Donkey Kong Country Returns instead. Anyway, outside of the boss fights, the action sequences in general are really strong. For an example, this Great Mine area. So back in Metroid Prime 2, there was this flashback cutscene where you learn the fate of the Federation troopers who are stranded on the planet Aether. And you see them battling this vast swarm of splinters, hundreds of them. And I was always disappointed because when the player encounters the splinters, you never fight more than a handful at a time. Well, this game has recreated that moment in the gameplay. In the Great Mine, there are multiple sections where you have to face down dozens of these feral creatures, and it feels stressful, intense, and overwhelming, again, especially on hard mode. Unfortunately, the action is let down by a lack of enemy variety. In previous games, every region would have its own unique enemy types, but in Prime 4, you're fighting variants of the same Cybots and Grievers over and over and over again. I mean, even as someone who likes the game, I have to admit, most of the positives I mention here do come with at least some drawbacks. However, despite the linear design of individual regions, the game does incorporate Metroidvania elements across its broader structure. There were multiple times where I'd be progressing through a level and then I ran into an obstacle I could not overcome yet. I had to return to previous areas, now equipped with new tools, new upgrades, to complete puzzles I couldn't solve before. This is something I've always loved about Metroid games, that loop of revisiting familiar ground with fresh capabilities, defeating old enemies with new powers, unlocking paths that were once closed. It creates a genuine sense of growth. When the world design earns it, I am more than happy to retrace my steps. And it's something I've seen some criticism of with Prime 4. I've seen a lot of people complain like, oh no, there's backtracking, or there are puzzles in the desert you can't solve the first time you encounter them, or there's a time where an NPC tells you go explore anywhere you want, but then you actually can't, because oh my gosh, you don't have the gear you need to overcome some obstacle. You know, just like every single Metroid and Metroidvania game ever made. If you're just complaining about having to drive through the desert again and again, then fine, fair enough. But these classic Metroidvania elements themselves were, for me at least, very satisfying. I would put this game in the same category as Other M, which probably sounds really damning, but I don't mean for it to be. When it first released, I reacted to Other M in a very similar manner to the way people are now reacting to Prime 4. It's not a real Metroid game, the level design is so linear, there's way too much focus on story, and the story sucks. But over the years, as I've replayed it, my opinion of Other M has softened. When I stopped focusing on what I wanted it to be and focused more on what it was trying to be, it became a lot more enjoyable. Which isn't to say that Other M doesn't have flaws, but it is a pretty fun action platformer game with some very cool world design and some very light Metroidvania-esque adventure mechanics. And I would describe Prime 4 in a pretty similar way. Okay, but now let me remove my positivity hat and put on my pretentious writer sombrero, because I want to talk about the story and I am going to spoil the entire thing here, so if you haven't played the game yet and you don't want the story spoiled, you should turn off the video now. I think Metroid Prime 4 has a worse story than Metroid Other M. For all of its flaws, at least Other M had a distinct, unifying, creative vision that tied everything together. It had a complete story it was trying to tell. It wasn't doing a very good job, but goddamn, it had a clear beginning, middle, and end. It even connected back to Fusion and Super in ways that were kind of cool. It had tension, a distinct threat which needed to be stopped. When characters sacrificed themselves, it was for a purpose that mattered. Whereas Prime 4's narrative is just this nebulous blob of nothing, disconnected from the entire rest of the series. I mean, the only thing worse than listening to Samus monotonously blather on about the most obvious plot twists ever written in Other M is watching her painfully awkward silence while characters speak directly to her constantly, and she just stares at them like a dumb mute in Prime 4. And the characters aren't even the problem. The initial reaction when Miles was revealed seemed blown way out of proportion to me. People were comparing him to Claptrap from the Borderlands series, which is not fair at all. He's not nearly as goofy, obnoxious, or talkative as that. He's barely in the game. He basically just functions identically to the hint system in the previous Prime games, which have always told the player exactly where to go. Metroid games have been doing exactly this for a long time now. Moreover, Silksong just came out this year, a fantastic Metroidvania that completely nails the isolated, lonely atmosphere and exploration, and has tons of characters. If written well, a big cast of characters can absolutely enhance a Metroidvania. It doesn't automatically ruin the atmosphere. I actually consider Anthony, remember him, to be one of the few highlights of Other M's story. He was likable and well written. Bring him back. Honestly, Hornet in Silksong is pretty close to how I wish Samus would be written. She is not chatty, but she responds when spoken to. She is direct, concise, remains focused on her objective, is rarely overcome by her emotions, but is also curious. She cares about the people around her, undergoes a full character arc. This is basically who Samus should be. I even kind of liked the characters in Metroid Prime 4. At worst, they are inoffensively bland, and at best, they're kind of cute sometimes. Like when Samus got her new suit, which is probably the sickest design she has ever had in any game. I absolutely nerded out over it. And then you meet a character in-game who does the same thing. It's fun, it's fine, it's okay. The problem with Prime 4's story is threefold: Sylux, the Lemorne, and a lack of tension. First, Sylux's character is completely wasted. He has no place in this story. He might as well not even be here. Prime 4 is really telling a story about the Lemorn, about their rise and fall and the possibility of their rebirth. And at first, it does seem like there's some kind of connective tissue tying Sylux to the Lemorn. He sets the narrative into motion by trying to steal one of their artifacts. When he arrives on Vuros, he is able to seize control of their technology and turn it against Samus. He has brought Metroids with him that are able to fuse with Lemorn Guardians. He attacks Samus multiple times to keep her from assembling the keys required to access their teleporter. How does he do all of this? Why is he doing this? What is the evil, grand master scheme he is trying to accomplish here? So when I reached the end of the game, I kept waiting for the big reveal where his connection to the Lemorn would be explained, and all of these different plot threads would get tied together in some satisfying way. But that reveal never comes, because Sylux has no meaningful connection to the Lemorn whatsoever. He was not targeting that Lemorn artifact for any particular reason. The whole encounter is basically random. His control of Lemorn technology doesn't matter. He doesn't actually care about the teleporter or the keys. His new bioengineered Metroids that can fuse with other creatures are barely a part of the story. It feels like the developers trapped themselves in a corner because with all of those previous teases, Sylux had to be included in the game. But they didn't actually have anything meaningful for him to do here, so he's just kind of shoehorned in. Metroid Prime 4 is actually telling two entirely distinct and disconnected stories, one about Sylux and one about the Lemorn, and even they are so similar to the Chozo and Luminoth from previous games that they just feel derivative. One more ancient dead race of super advanced aliens with psychic powers and a preference for peace, brought low by cataclysmic tragedy. And finally, there is a serious lack of stakes in this plot. In the final scene, the rest of the Federation troopers sacrifice themselves to give Samus a chance to teleport away. And it's meant to feel very dramatic and emotional. But why? It doesn't matter. Samus doesn't have any compelling reason why she needs to leave. There's no world-ending threat for her to face on the other side of that teleporter. No ticking clock. No reason for them to be fighting so hard to help her specifically escape. Sylux doesn't have any grand dastardly plan which must be stopped. The Grievers are not a threat to the wider universe. I'm not going to claim that the previous Prime games had really amazing writing or anything, but Prime 4's story just feels pointless, and Sylux's inclusion is immensely disappointing. So yeah, I'm not going to be doing any more videos about Prime 4. Speaking as someone who might very well be the biggest fan of the Prime trilogy in the world, like I play at least one if not all three games every single year. Talon 4 and Aether and Brio and Skytown feel like a second home to me. Anyway, I think Prime 4 is a very good and even occasionally great action-adventure game, with gorgeous visual and audio design, fantastic boss fights, and a terrible story. And it's not really a Metroid Prime game. Just like Other M, I have to acknowledge that it's good at what it's trying to be, but it's just not what I, and probably most longtime fans, wanted it to be. Anyway, this is not the end of Metroid for this channel. Whenever I finish my God of War retrospective series, I do plan to cover others, including Metroid. Someday I will do deep dives into the Prime trilogy and Super and Fusion and even Other M, which is a game that I think is a lot better than most people give it credit for. But before then, I need to finish my series on Silksong, so yeah, see you later.